This is Southern Cross News with Joe Palmer.
Good evening everyone and welcome to Southern Cross News. A man accused of failing to report a killing has been found guilty in the Launceston Supreme Court. The body of Tyson Timothy Clark Robertson was discovered at a Mayfield home in April last year. Robert William Broad maintained he had no knowledge Mr Clark Robertson had been killed, but a jury today decided otherwise. Our reporter Sean McComish has more.
It took the jury just 1 hour and 40 minutes to find Robert William Broad guilty of failing to report the killing of Tyson Clark Robertson. The two-day trial heard Broad, the victim and two others were living at a Mayfield address. Broad admitted to police he arrived home in late July 2016, where he was told Mr Clark Robertson had been killed and that his body was in a shed. He maintained to not believe the claim, even after finding a spade and a suspected grave in the backyard months later. The defendant insisted it was only when police came to him on April 11, 2017, he became aware Mr Clark Robertson was dead. Shortly after, the victim's badly decomposed remains were found in a shallow grave at the Mayfield property. Broad's lawyer said his client suffered from learning difficulties and could not piece the evidence together. The Crown argued that was inconceivable, putting it to jurors Broad was too scared to come forward. Today, prosecutor John Ransom said the delay had impacted the investigation, and because of the state of decomposition, there had been difficulties in finding the cause and manner of death. Broad did not react as the guilty verdict was read out. Shortly afterwards, Mr Clark Robertson's father wept as details were recounted of his son's death. Broad's mother was also by his side as he left court. Two other co-accused are yet to face trial over charges of murder and being an accessory after the fact respectively. They've both pleaded not guilty. Broad will reappear in court tomorrow where he's expected to be sentenced.
Tonight we're getting a rare look inside Risdon Prison at an upgraded 40-bed facility in the minimum security section. With the complex at 98% capacity, prisoner advocates are calling for more measures to alleviate overcrowding before another new facility comes online.
The Corrections Minister arriving for a look behind the barbed wire at the Risdon complex, inspecting a new section of the Ron Barwick Minimum Security Men's Prison. This redeveloped 40-bed facility to start taking prisoners from next week.
Modernising it to bring it up to the standards that we feel are necessary to not only promote better prisoner behaviour, but also to provide rehabilitation opportunities.
This is where some of the complex's better behaved and less serious criminals will be housed. The prison boss says getting a bed here is like a reward.
There are a number of incentives for them to progress through the system, one of those being, there's better accommodation and more facilities available to you if you use your time in prison constructively.
The Prisoners Legal Service obviously welcomes any sort of betterment to the prison facilities and inmate welfare, but that still doesn't address the issue that is overcrowding at the prison.
Those overcrowding issues have stirred tensions in the past. The government says it's working to improve the system by employing more guards, developing a new southern remand centre and planning for a northern prison.
Certainly the first stage will be delivered within 5 years, and that's a $270 million investment, creating 4,000 direct and indirect jobs in the construction of that over the 10-year period.
Prisoner advocates also calling for more attention on post-prison housing.
What the government should be doing is really focusing on housing for prisoners once they are released from prison, because we have inmates that are being denied parole and being denied bail simply because they don't have housing.
Meaning a longer stay here for some. Michael Breen, Southern Cross News.
In a milestone meeting, federal, state and local governments have come together to start planning Hobart's future, while making sweeping promises to overhaul our struggling transport and housing sectors. The group has failed to announce any specific measures or funding.
A meeting of political leaders discussing the future of Greater Hobart. 3 levels of government coming together today to plan the rollout of an historic city deal.
All will be revealed at the end of this year. We've still got a bit of work to do, but we're in the final stretches now. and we've got the broad architecture of what we want to achieve, but now we need to get down to the specifics.
The deal promises to prepare the city for the future through upgrades to transport, housing and infrastructure. But the Hobart meeting failed to provide any real detail or funding arrangements.
We'll now begin to communicate in coming weeks with the councils, provide them with an opportunity to understand what will be captured within the deal, and hopefully we can have it completed by the end of the year. It
has already been revealed the deal would see a new Bridgewater Bridge and an Antarctic precinct at Macquarie Point. New legislation would also force the Hobart, Glenorchy, Clarence and Kingborough councils to work together.
We expressed our desire to see the deal made even more specific and the commitments more tangible.
The new Kingborough Mayor advocating for jobs to stay in his region if the Australian Antarctic Division is moved as part of the deal.
It was good to hear that the Minister has given us a commitment that there will be no net decrease in government jobs and economic footprint within the Kingborough region.
But many say today was a long-awaited step forward.
No, there is no timeline agreed to. Remember, this is still a work in progress. But I think everyone understands we really need to stop talking about some of this stuff and just get to work.
A Launceston City deal was signed last year. Michelle Wisby, Southern Cross News.
The University of Tasmania is paying tribute to World War I diggers ahead of the centenary of Armistice. An honour board was rededicated at the law faculty, holding 125 names of graduates, students and counsellors who served in the conflict. The elaborately carved board was originally dedicated in 1924 at the Queen's Domain campus. A support group for those who have lost loved ones to suicide is set to expand statewide thanks to a mass fundraising effort. The Black Dog motorbike riders jumping on two wheels for some camaraderie and serious conversation.
They're big and they're bulky, but these bikes are the perfect starter for sensitive conversation. The Black Dog riders raise money for Lifeline, this year raising $14,000, a lot of that coming from their one-day ride earlier this year.
The motorbikes have such an appeal to the general public and people often come and talk to us, and so the conversation opens up.
The organisation can now expand its bereavement groups across parts of Tasmania, starting next year.
Gives people who've lost someone to suicide a place to go, to talk with other people who've had a similar loss, to normalise their feelings and to get the support that they need.
Suicide is one of the leading causes of death for Tasmanians.
It has a ripple effect, so it doesn't just impact on individuals and families, it impacts on workplaces and communities.
Older people within our community found to be suffering the most, but there is help available. Anyone can contact Lifeline at any time for support.
That there's a strong correlation between loneliness, social isolation and mental health issues and potential feelings of suicide. So it's really important that we address those issues as a Tasmanian community.
It is okay to talk, it's okay to admit that you're struggling even if you don't quite understand what it is.
Louise Hedger, Southern Cross News.
Sparkling wine connoisseurs will be in their element from this weekend with the Effervescent Festival kicking off in Hobart. The event attracting winemakers from across Tasmania ready to showcase how our world-class product is created.
Over the last couple of years, it's become bigger and bigger and bigger. So being part of it and being able to show what we do and our component in Tasmania, yeah, it's really exciting.
We're getting people from right around the country and from overseas, wine enthusiasts, people wanting to learn a little bit more about sparkling wine, and those just wanting a decadent day out.
This year's festival has 10 new events and will run over a week in Hobart and Launceston. Now let's take a look at the day's business and finance news with thanks to Tasplan, your local super fund. Banking and healthcare stocks lifted the Australian share market, while the energy sector also pushed ahead despite weak oil prices. The ASX 200 index has risen by 31.3 points. A short time ago, the Australian dollar was trading at 72.83 US cents and 107.21 New Zealand cents.
Tasmania has held out for a draw in an extraordinary final day of its Sheffield Shield clash against New South Wales. The Blues piled immense pressure on the Tigers in the final overs, but Bo Webster was the hero in a marathon innings. In a good look for Shield cricket, both sides were playing to win. New South Wales spent only 4 overs at the crease, making 1 for 22, before declaring with a 349-run lead. For Alex Doolan, that meant game on.
Thrown up and slapped down the ground marvellously. That one is going to go all the way for 6.
Surely striking some fear into the Blues, Doolan and Jordan Silk were well in control during their time at the crease. It took some 30 overs before the partnership broke.
Abbott worked to the man at short leg and he gets him, or short fine leg, and the breakthrough finally comes for New South Wales.
Doolan kept piling on the runs, reaching 90 before his day came to an end. While Beau Webster's run rate was a trickle, Jake Doran wasn't so patient.
One bounce over the rope for 4.
Doran making it to the 30s before Nathan Lyon worked some magic. He soon struck again, bowling George Bailey for 6, and the Tigers had the pressure on. Webster brought up his half-century, but he could only watch as partners walked back to the pavilion.
Ball hits him on the pad. This will be close. He's gone.
Matthew Wade out for 16, Tim Payne for just 1.
He's got him. Nathan Lyon with an absolute beauty of a delivery, crashing into the stumps.
Lyon would be the central figure again, taking Tom Rogers for a duck, just as the Tigers had reduced the deficit to less than 100 runs. But it was on shaky ground. Jackson Bird survived yet another dangerous Nathan Lyon spell, and with only 7 overs to spare, Tasmania needed 95 runs. New South Wales surrounded Beau Webster like an umbrella, but he still managed to pick a gap. A huge effort from Webster, eventually finishing in the 80s after facing more than 200 balls. The Tigers holding out for a draw. An international recruit for Tasmania's women's side has touched down in the state. English spinner Alex Hartley is keen to impress when she lines up for the Tigers in 2 Women's National Cricket League matches against Queensland and South Australia.
I've obviously got a point to prove. I've just missed out on World Cup selection, so the girls start tomorrow out in the West Indies. So I've got a point to prove. I've got a bit of fire in my belly, and yeah, I want to get back in that England side.
The 25-year-old will also train full-time with the Hurricanes in the hope of breaking into the WBBL side. Her first WNCL match is tomorrow at the TCA ground. The new coach of Tasmania's fledgling TAC Cup side says he plans to introduce a high-intensity environment to get the most out of the state's young players. Adrian Fletcher will be in charge of our under-18s when they return to the competition full-time next year. But he says the side is about more than simply pumping out draft prospects. Adrian Fletcher's career spans roughly 3 decades, but shaping football in his home state is something truly unique.
My biggest thing is creating intensity. You've got to have intensity and it's got to be consistent. Sometimes young players don't see what that looks like until we create it in our environment.
And that will be Fletcher's job next season, when he takes the reins of a resurrected TAC Cup side.
We've got to make sure the next 2 years as a 16 to an 18-year-old that we give them the tools of the trade to give them a chance.
The 49-year-old says the bar has been lifted for draftees and the state needs to catch up, but he can see up to 4 Tasmanians being taken in the next draft.
Chase Jones will go top 20, I'll put my house on that. Tarrant Thomas will go top 10, and then you've got Fraser Turner, who'll probably go a 3rd rounder in the draft. And then you've got Nick Baker. Nick Baker is a tough halfback flanker that has AFL attributes.
Fletcher was plucked from Glenorchy after playing in the violent 1988 TFL Grand Final and winning the league's best and fairest. He would become a footballing nomad at the top level, playing more than 200 games across 4 clubs, his greatest success at Fremantle, where he won a best and fairest. His move to the coach's box saw him learn from the likes of Lee Matthews and Mick Malthouse. But Fletcher says his role is as much about helping local football as it is the AFL.
If they don't get drafted, we want them to go back into the community footy and show some leadership qualities.
Good evening. A cold -3 was the state's low overnight, and that was at Mount Wellington. Hobart and Launceston both reached 17 degrees, Burnie and Devonport 16. 19 was today's high at St Helens, Friendly Beaches and Maria Island 17, 16 for Smithton and Flinders Island, Ouse 15 along with Strawn, 14 for Low Head and King Island, Lyowini 10 and the Harts Mountains just 7 degrees. Mostly low-level clouds seen here on the satellite picture streaming over Tasmania. A cloud band stretches from central Queensland to the Tasman Sea, and that is associated with a tropical moisture infeed in the middle levels of the atmosphere, originating off the Pilbara coast of WA there. Tomorrow shows the cold front approaching Tasmania. High centres lie over New South Wales and the Tasman Sea, while the broad trough extends over the eastern, northern and western parts of the country. West to northwesterly winds 15 to 25 knots around coastal waters, lighter about the east, seas 2 metres. Tomorrow, showers forecast at times for most of the state. Hobart 19, 19 also for Campania, 17 at Huonville. Launceston 16, both Devonport and Georgetown 15. Burnie 15 degrees, 16 at Strawn and 15 there at Wynyard tomorrow. St Helens looks shower-free, partly cloudy there with a high of 18. 18 also for Swansea and Port Arthur, and an expected shower or two for those two. The UV is 7 tomorrow, right across the state. Moving ahead to Saturday's forecast now, showers about the west, far south and the islands, fine elsewhere. On Sunday, those showers in the west and far south will begin clearing in the afternoon and fine for the remainder of the state. Cloud increasing during the day but remaining dry. A shower or two developing in Melbourne, also in Darwin and Broome with the chance of a storm. A sunny day for Perth, Adelaide and Alice Springs, and partly cloudy for Brisbane, Canberra and Sydney. Currently it's cloudy and 13 in Hobart, Launceston mostly cloudy 14, Devonport mostly cloudy with 13.